and welcome to episode 26 of the Best Games Period. I'm your co-host, Jack Gardner. With me, as always, are Jeremy Brown and Daniel Jones. And today we are going to be talking about a very, very indie, very little game called Passage that a lot of you may or may not be familiar with. But before we dive into this very arty game, how are you guys doing? How are you fellas? Jeremy?
I'm doing fairly well, Jack. I haven't played many video games this week. I've been working a lot. We were supposed to get an awesome thunder and lightning storm last night and tonight, but it hasn't happened, so part of me is grateful for that because the power didn't go out, but I also like those things, so a little sad about that.
Is there ever a part of you that's just, like, nervous that the lightning is going to hit you? Like, even when you're inside?
Well, yeah, kind of.
Is that just me? Am I just a weirdo?
Real quick fun story. Growing up, like, in the Black Hills during the summertime, like, I'm sure it wasn't every day, but it seemed like it. Every single day around 5 o'clock, we would just get this huge lightning and thunderstorm. And most of the time, we were at the city pool when that happened. So they like, always, yeah. I mean, like, they put the fear of lightning into you in that area, man. Like, when it started lightning, you were to get somewhere safe and dry off. So I don't know if that's still held over from that or what. And also, one of the Boy Scout leaders, when Dylan was in Cub Scouts, he got struck by lightning, so. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he was okay.
Was he okay?
The irony is that his real job was like a line worker for like an electric company. And yeah, he never got electrocuted, shocked doing that, but he got struck by lightning.
I shouldn't find that funny, but
I know.
It is a little bit ironic. Yeah. And that's something I always wondered. Is it likely that lightning would hit water? Like, does that happen a lot to bodies of water? I always was taught that it was more likely to happen to, like, trees. But they still always made us get out of pools.
Yeah. I guess it kind of comes down to water's a conductor of electricity, so I don't know.
Lightning could hit water easily, and, yeah, I've seen lightning hit over the ocean. I've seen lightning hit a large lake. So, yeah, that should happen.
Well, look at you, Mr. Lightning Man.
Just saying, it does.
I've seen lightning hit dry barns. I mean, like, things just catch on fire around me, and I blame it on lightning. It happens, right? Yeah, it's plausible. Definitely not an arsonist.
Listen, I'm just going to say that my dad nearly got struck by lightning when I was a kid, and it had nothing to do with my spiteful satanic tendencies. Nothing at all.
So what'd you do, like make him hold up a metal stick during a lightning storm or something?
No, really. He was pumping gas. We were in North Carolina for a vacation, and he was pumping gas, and it hit a telephone pole like 10 feet away.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was in the car. It was very scary.
I've seen it hit pretty close a few times, but not that close. That would be freaky.
Today I went to a kid's birthday party, 4-year-old's birthday party.
And lightning struck. It was weird.
There was lightning there. It was really weird. I don't know why. No, but they had this lady come with all these animals, and it was fantastic because there was like this 5-foot python that she brought with her.
That's right. You like snakes.
And I got to hold it. And I was in heaven for about 2 seconds, and then she took the snake away, and I said, no!
And then the snake slithered away and tragically killed 6 of the 4-year-olds?
No.
Oh.
No. The snake was not big enough to kill anything, other than, like, a hamster. She did have a chinchilla there, and she had a ferret in a cage, and when she took the snake out, the ferret must have seen or smelled the snake or something, and the ferret started freaking out.
Did they fight? Oh.
No, this ferret was in the cage, Jack.
Ferrets are like furry snakes.
Kind of,
actually. They're so flexible. Yeah. Did you know that ferrets can't bend backwards, though?
I did not. That's very bizarre.
Their spines do not go backwards.
So how do they do the disco limbo, then?
I don't know. They can curl into a ball if they go forward, but they can't go back at all.
Well, I'm glad you got to hold a snake. I know that's something you always enjoy doing.
Yep. And my daughter pet it, and she liked it for a second, and then she got scared. And yep.
Well.
But also, I've been playing games.
What have you been playing?
This week. Uncharted 4.
Oh, what? No way.
Exclusively, other than the passage for a few minutes. Yeah, no, Uncharted 4. I loved it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How would you say it ranks up against the other Uncharted games?
I think it's in a completely different league than the other ones. I think it's a step up.
Really?
Yep.
Okay, let me ask a different question. How would you say it ranks up alongside something like The Last of Us?
It's not as good as The Last of Us.
Okay.
But it's better than the other Uncharted. I still think that like my favorite is still probably Uncharted 2, but as far as like an experience overall and like objectively speaking, I think this is a better game.
Okay. I was sad I missed our episode last week. But you guys held down the fort really
We'll
well.
have to talk about 2 and 3 at some point.
We can still duke it out over those ones.
Yeah. I had things I was saying to no one in particular while I was listening to that episode.
I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Yeah, but you guys did you done good, champs.
Well, we tried to hold down the fort.
But yeah, I don't know. I just think Uncharted 4 for me, like, it starts off really slow, and there's a lot of I haven't really heard many people talk about it this way, so I want to just get this out there. But to me, that game is a really interesting amalgamation of walking simulators, third-person shooters, and stealth action games, and cinematic, almost Heavy Rain-ish type games.
Huh.
Without really any kind of branching story paths.
You just threw together like 8 different genres.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And the fascinating thing about it to me is like I think the body count in this game is lower than any other game in the series, and far lower than The Last of Us. There's really, per chapter, you have maybe 1 or 2 encounters with enemies.
So would you say it's more in line with like the body count of an Indiana Jones film?
No.
No?
It's still way above that.
Okay.
But
I mean he kills a lot of people in the first couple Indiana Jones movies.
that's true. He does. I don't know, maybe. So it's just that like they mix up the action and the shooting sequences with this interesting, like really lengthy levels that are just exploration. And because, like I said on the last week's episode, the mystery behind it all is so compelling, I didn't mind that at all. In fact, I really liked it. Like, even the last, like, Jeremy, I told you last week that, like, it starts to pick up around
about where I'm at, yeah.
Yeah, about where you're at, the end of the
ninth chapter. Yeah.
And it does, but only in, like, the momentum of the story. Where what actually does happen is, like, there's big explosions of action and fast-paced stuff going on, and then it will slow down, and there'll be a lull. Even in that second half, like, there's a lull there where you are just exploring, and it's just you and Sam for a long time, just kind of exploring, and there's maybe 1 or 2 big action sequences, and sequences where you're hunting dudes and stealthing and shooting them, and then it's more freaking long stretches of exploration. And that's where, like, the walking simulator stuff really comes in, because it's just exploring, reading journals, picking up artifacts, looking at the world, talking to Sam about what you're observing, and solving puzzles, and then, like, the story progresses and more stuff happens. And probably the last, there's kind of an outlier in the last 5 chapters, but the last 5 chapters all are just balls to the wall action till the end, and it's a really cool ending, but there are definitely just long stretches in that game where there's not a lot of action, and I personally loved it because the tension's still high the whole time and the mystery is still really compelling, so you don't mind it at all.
Are there zombies?
I will not give anything away as far as that, but no, there are no supernatural things.
Okay.
I was going to play more today, but I ended up watching Snow White and the Huntsman instead.
How was that?
Huh?
How was that?
Terrible.
Oh.
Have you not seen it?
I haven't.
Don't waste
I haven't
your
seen
time.
any of these new like reboots of classic fairy tales.
This one's from like 2012, I guess.
I don't know. Like I see trailers for those things, and I'm just like, okay, it's the same story that I know as a fairy tale, but this time it's going to have a great big battle at the end, and there are going to be armies clashing, and they're going to do the Lord of the Rings thing.
Yeah.
And if I want to watch that, I'll go watch Lord of the Rings.
That's pretty much what I said when I was asked if I liked the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there can be cool twists on fairy tale stuff. Like, I actually really liked, what's it called? Like, Sleepy Hollow? Like, that one with Johnny Depp?
Yeah.
As kind of like a, like, steampunk Victorian thing. And I like it because it's weird, and it does weird stuff, but, I don't know, doing the big battle thing doesn't do much for me.
Right.
Yeah.
I always wanted to see the Brothers Grimm with, I think it was Matt Damon and Heath Ledger.
Yeah, that was actually pretty decent.
Yeah, it was.
Right.
One of the last movies Heath Ledger did.
You guys want to know a fun fact about that movie? I bought it on a UMD to watch on my PSP.
Oh my god.
That and Superbad.
Was there anything...
I still have them somewhere.
Was there anything less universal than the UMD?
No, not that I've come across.
The universal media device?
Yeah, no. I don't think there has been.
They must have stopped making those, right?
Oh, yeah. They stopped making the movies shortly after they started making them. And then, of course, the games, eventually, if I remember right, the last PSPs didn't even use them. Like, about halfway through the PSP's life, they just did away with them, and I want to say went to...
They'd probably just buy them digitally now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they were something else.
Well, as for me, I've been playing a little bit of this game called Stellaris. It's kind of the indie strategy game of the moment. And it actually has... I liked it. It has a lot of issues with like AI, and it is paced really oddly, where like there will be periods of time in your game where things happen very quickly, and then there will be long stretches of waiting for stuff to happen. But for the most part, I really like it. There are tons of random events every time you load in. It's kind of like Civilization, except in space, and there are tons of random events, and basically it kind of creates... you can create your own race of alien creatures, and once you do that, the narrative of what you do kind of shapes your race, I guess. It's really... You're basically building a mythology and a history for your race of alien creatures, and I had a lot of really great... I had some great times with that. Like, I created a race of creatures called the Sneeb, who... were basically Gonzo from the Muppets, and they lived to be like 250 years old. And at one point, all of my military got wiped out, and my enemies were just bombarding my planets. And I just outlived them, outlived their government, and then signed a peace treaty with the next generation of their leaders. And that's how
legit.
That's how I won that war. But yeah, it's really a lot of interesting stuff. You can find, derelict spaceships. The asteroids will sometimes collide with your planets, but you have the opportunity to send your fleet to go shoot up the asteroid first. You can discover ring worlds. There are game-ending cataclysms that can happen. I don't know. It's really fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, people seem to be enjoying it quite a bit.
Yeah.
Some really good emergent narrative there on a large scale rather than on a personal scale, from which you find in stuff like Far Cry.
Right.
And so I'm hoping that going forward, like, other companies kind of look at Stellaris and are like, oh, we can do some of this interesting, larger scale, emergent narrative in our games too. I was thinking it'd be interesting if the next Far Cry tried something like that too.
Yeah, good luck with that.
I mean, they're Far Cry is doing some interesting stuff recently with, Primal and 3.
Yeah, but Far Cry... I don't want to get into it, but Primal's just like the same structure as 3 and 4. It's just with a different setting. I would love to see them do...
Well, but
really
I think the interesting thing about Primal is that it just completely gets rid of guns, which were pretty core to the Far Cry experience. And so I think...
But from what I hear, eventually other things just become guns. Essentially. Yeah. I don't know. I want to play it. I just don't want to play it that badly. So we kind of Far Cried out. We need to do a Far Cry episode sometime.
Oh, definitely.
Do they have just like really primitive weapons then? Like bows and arrows and spears and stuff?
Yeah. Basically cavemen stuff. And from I haven't heard of anyone basically having gun replacements, but instead, as you progress through the game, you just get better spears and better bows and arrows.
Cool.
And learn how to kind of tame nature.
Attack for you.
Yeah.
Right on.
It is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I'd like to play it. Before I bash on it too much.
Yeah. Be bashing on things before you experience them, Daniel.
Sorry.
People will stop listening to the show.
Weird debate that happened over like the last week. The question of reviewer skill and how necessary that is.
Right.
I didn't dive deep into that because I just looked at the debate and thought it was stupid. And just like, it was one of those days where I was like, I'm working on stuff. I have things to do. I'm not going to waste 3 hours catching up on this stink that's happening on Twitter. But I mean, my 2 cents is that games are one of the few mediums that actively fight people who play them. And they do demand like a base level of skill or ability, and
certainly,
but as long as a reviewer meets that base requirement and is able to understand the systems and mechanics of the game enough to like be able to understand it, like I think you're fine. Like,
as long as they can get through the game. Like, I don't think you should review a game if you didn't get to the end. If you weren't able to get through all the way to the end, unless, it's a super long game and you saw enough of it to know.
Yeah.
If it's like something like Skyrim, I don't think you have to get through all of it, but you should get through the majority of it and enough to be able to comment on this, how it all works and how the story plays out and whatever, but to expect reviewers to be the best gamers in the world is just kind of silly.
I think to expect anything specific out of reviewers is silly. It's all just an opinion to begin with. And,
right. I mean,
and like the length thing is, I don't disagree with that, but one person can play 20 minutes of a game and feel like they know what it is and that they can write it down and nobody can stop them from doing it. You don't have to listen to them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like they're being paid with tax dollars and wasting all of your money doing this. That's just their opinion they're putting down on, a computer screen somewhere.
No, they're just getting paid by EA.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, what separates maybe like low quality reviewers from high quality reviewers are the people who are able to not just have an opinion, but have an educated opinion on a game. And B, be able to communicate that educated opinion through whether they're reviewing in video form or through written word. Like, those are the two main qualities. So you should be able to play and understand what you're reviewing and then be able to communicate that to your audience.
Yeah, I mean, if I were like an editor for a website, I would make sure that my employees had that competence level or find them a different thing to do.
as far as games go, Passage is control and dexterity wise one of the most basic games you can make.
My pet ferret could review that game, and he can't even bend over backwards.
Well, he definitely wouldn't bend over backwards to review it.
No.
Do you have a pet ferret?
No.
Okay. I don't know why. Like, I knew you didn't have one, but for some reason, the way you said it just filled me with enough doubt that I was like, do you?
No.
Not sure.
That's the trick.
I was trying to bring it back to our earlier conversation.
Yeah.
My roommates used to have a ferret. Or the roommates I used to have had a ferret.
Before they got hit by lightning?
Mysteriously. It's really strange. The worst thing ever. And that was at my house that I owned.
Oh, really?
And I never should have let them have the ferret in the house because we kept the ferret in a room, and the room had hardwood floors, so no carpet or anything, so I didn't think it would get that stinky. But no,
they stink.
It got so smelly.
Yeah.
And it took months to get rid of that smell.
Yeah. Even if you have their stinkers removed, they still stink.
Yeah.
They have stinkers?
Yeah, you can take them to the vet and get their stink glands removed or whatever it is.
Anyway, Passage.
Yeah.
It's from 2007.
It is.
It's essentially a game jam game. It had to be made in 70 days for an event called Gamma 256.
Yep.
Which is related to a group called Coco Romy, which is basically a collective of game artists in Canada that include one of the most notable people that the name will be recognized by listeners is Phil Fish was part of that.
Who?
Phil Fish.
Oh, I'd never heard of him.
Oh, yeah. Well, you definitely wouldn't have heard of him if you got on Twitter in like the last year.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't think he's made anything in quite a while.
Nope. So, it's made by Jason Rohrer. Rohrer?
Rohrer? I just call it Rohrer.
Rohrer. Sorry, Jason. And it was limited to essentially this really blocky pixel resolution, and it's about 2 megabytes large. Like, the entire game fits in 2 megabytes, and the entire game is done in 5 minutes, and it's free. So if you want to know what we're talking about on this episode this week, just go download it, and you can play it, and then listen to us talk about it, I guess.
Jack will probably put a link to the download in the blog posts for this show.
Probably. Right, and maybe even in the episode description itself.
Oh my goodness.
So it will go everywhere the episode goes.
Cool.
Everywhere you go.
Everywhere the light touches.
Everywhere the lightning strikes.
Ride the lightning. Okay. So anyway.
Yeah.
This is a game we all played this week. Yeah?
This is. Yeah.
And Jack, you'd played it before this week. I think Daniel and I,
and I'm the one who suggested we do it on the show.
Correct.
Because I think it brings up a lot of interesting topics about games.
In your words, you wanted to talk about an artsy-fartsy game, and this is the one you chose.
I did, because, I mean, a lot of the games we've covered on this show have been kind of the big-budget AAA games of, all time. Mm-hmm. And I just figured, hey, let's talk about something indie. And not just, like, indie, but super indie.
Super indie.
Indie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like the Levin Seville vegan of indie. It's pretty indie.
I mean, you can't get much. I mean, when you go back beyond Passage, like, you can find other indie games before this, but I think Passage might be kind of the vanguard for arty games. I'm going to call them arty games instead of indie games, because indie means a whole lot of things now, whereas art games are kind of they're really small and personal projects, I guess. It's not really a good differentiator, but
I mean, really, technically, Valve is indie.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I mean, indie now can mean like studios that have like 40 people working at them.
Psionics.
I mean, art games in general are just made by one person, and they are generally put out there at a very low cost, if not for free, and you can find them literally everywhere on the internet. There are tons of them. If you go to, there's a website called Itch.io. There's a ton of them over there. But I think as far as arty games go, Passage is probably the one that kind of showed. I don't know. Maybe I'm making too big of a deal out of Passage. What do you guys think?
Well, let's talk about the game first.
Yeah. What is it?
Well, it's a side-scrolling game that was intentionally made in a weird aspect ratio and with as low resolution as possible to meet the standards of the Gamma 256 event that Jack had alluded to earlier. And really, you scroll left to right, trying to avoid obstacles. There's an occasional treasure chest, and the game lasts like 5 minutes, maybe just a few seconds over that. And you are pretty much trying to get as far to the right as you can each time, I guess, if there is an objective. But within that, you have a choice to pick up a wife, I guess is what you would call it, or a whatever you want to call it in this day and age, but I think at the time it was intended to be somebody that you fell in love with and married. And you go through this side-scrolling adventure? I don't know if you'd call it that, because you don't really do anything except try to avoid blocks. And you go as far as you can, and the more you can avoid obstacles and the more treasure chests you hit, the higher score you can get. And you can go on it alone. You don't actually have to pick up the wife if you don't want to. Mm-hmm. Although reading Wikipedia today, I saw, like I said, that at some point you found the girl. She was always right there at the very beginning for me, so I don't know if that's changed over the years or what.
Yeah, she was right there at the beginning.
Yeah, every time I played I was like I could see her as soon as I started up the game. I honestly didn't know you could avoid her until today when I read this. Anyway, so you age, your characters age as you're playing the game, and eventually they die. And in my experience, every time I played it, the woman died first, and then shortly after I died. And that's kind of it. They don't noticeably age, because, again, the resolution is so low, and it's just pixels.
Well, I think after you hit, like, late middle age, it starts to...
It's more noticeable then.
Yeah. Hair starts to go white and get a little more hunched over.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jason Rohrer describes it as a memento mori, just a memento mori game, which is a fancy Latin way of saying, you
must die.
You must die. Everyone dies.
I agree with that.
It's very Game of Thrones. It's but yeah, it's basically condensing a life down into a 5-minute experience, and you can kind of interpret the blocks to be, different choices, decisions, impediments,
taxes
in life, taxes, and it actually took me, when I first played this, it took me like maybe 5 or 10 playthroughs to realize that you can actually go up and down too. You don't just have to walk to the right. And that each level basically can keep going down for quite a ways. And it's interesting because I think there's a lot to unpack in this little tiny game. I mean, what did you think of it, Daniel? Because you had thoughts on it. I know you had thoughts on it.
I mean, taken in the context of it just being a game jam game, and I thought it's okay, it just felt like a student project to me that really felt really underdeveloped and not fun. And Such a simple concept that I feel like any game could have eventually done. I mean, eventually any game's going to talk about death, and just because this was the first one to do it doesn't mean that it did it very well, because I don't think it really did do it very well. Personally, I don't get it. I don't get it. I thought it was really boring for 5 minutes.
Okay.
And then your wife dies, and then you die. And okay. That's it. And like, I get it. It's a simple game jam game, and it was also maybe one of the first games to really tackle that concept. But I guess, having played through Journey about 40 times, I just feel like other games have done it much better. Even To the Moon, which was the game that I recommended we talk about at some point, because that's an artsy-fartsy game, basically explores the guy's life fully from childhood to death and beyond. Spoilers. Without feeling like a slog. And this felt like a 5-minute slog, and I don't know why anybody would play it more than once.
Did you only play it once?
That's my hot take right there.
Did you only play it once?
Yes.
Interesting. What about you, Jeremy? Did you play it once, or did you play it more?
I played it like 5 times.
Okay. Did you get the same impression?
I did the first time, honestly. And then I got thinking, I was like, there's got to be more to it than this. And there was. Like, I didn't know that there even were treasure chests at first. I was just avoiding those because I thought they were other obstacles. And, so I got progressively better scores. And after the second or third time, it was just more about getting a better score.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I agree. Like, it's not a fun game. But I also think that that's part of the point. Like,
yeah.
It's purposely not a fun game. It's more of an artistic statement, I guess, in game form. And I don't know, like, it's interesting. I find people's reactions to it interesting because I've always been kind of interested in existential philosophy and stuff like that. And to me, it's a very existential thing, this game, Passage. Like, I feel like if we were capable of condensing a person's entire life experiences down to 5 minutes, and were then to show them to other people, a lot of people would have that same reaction of, oh man, this was boring, and that's it. Like, I feel like that would be our genuine reaction to a lot of people. Because life can be a slog sometimes. And sometimes you don't meet the right person right away. Like, in a few of my playthroughs, I never ran into the wife character.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so weird. I don't know
weird.
how that's possible.
Well, and it's interesting because if you don't run into the wife character, you can fit into different areas through those obstacles.
Yeah.
Because when you meet the wife,
Right.
it makes you 2 blocks.
Yeah.
2 blocks long, which means you can't fit through 1 block long corridors.
Correct.
So there were times where I would get the wife, and you'd have to stay together, and you couldn't get into maybe that treasure chest that was in a twisty corridor because you had to stick together.
And that's a cute touch because it's it's definitely a metaphor for how people kind of have to make sacrifices for monogamous relationships and marriage and etc.
I think your score goes up faster
that.
if you have the companion also, though.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. And it's interesting that you paid attention to the score, because I didn't. I've never really paid that much attention to the score. But I did know that, like, if you got a treasure chest, your score went up more. But it's... I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's an interesting comment that no matter how many of those treasure chests you get, at the end of the day, you're still dead.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of Passage, you still turn into a little tombstone.
Like, it's kind of interesting to me that there even is a score.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I found that kind of fascinating, too, and that's why I wanted to just see how far I could take it. Like, would the game actually last longer? I don't think it does. I think it's just you get better at it and whatnot.
Well, I mean, that's another, I feel like, very existential theme in Passage, is that it doesn't matter what your score is. Like, you can literally spend the entire game not moving from the initial start point.
Yeah.
And just die there.
Right.
You can go down instead of to the right. Like, there are tons of different ways to play the game.
Can you just keep going down?
I think that there is eventually a barrier when you go down. Okay. But it... I feel like there's so much of a metaphor.
Can you go left?
No.
Ah.
No.
Well, you can, but not backwards. Like,
yeah, you can't go left from the starting.
Yeah, you can't go backwards.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. I don't know. I just feel like it's as good as an encapsulation of life as you can get in an 8-bit format, in a way that isn't like, there's no dialogue, there's no talking. It's all purely symbolic, and you're kind of making your own meaning out of it. And I guess if I had to describe Passage as a game, the gamiest part of it to me is coming up with, like, what is happening in these characters' lives as you're playing. Maybe that first treasure chest you find is like your first big job promotion, or buying a car, or buying a house, and like all these treasure chests.
Finding a real treasure chest.
Yeah, that could be too. Your life is the Goonies.
Maybe it's about Nathan Drake.
Maybe. And you go through all this stuff, and I mean, it is the memento mori aspect of it makes it a tragedy, like, because no matter how well you do, you're still going to end up as that tombstone.
Correct.
And it's, I don't know. I've cried. This game has made me cry multiple times. Especially when your companion dies. I don't know. There's just something really there. It's interesting to me that the game is able to foster that relationship between the two of you, because you are sacrificing these treasure chests as you're progressing through this game. And, sometimes you have, 2 or 3 minutes or even more to kind of bond with this other character that you're sacrificing for. And then at the end of the game, they die first. And then you kind of have, how do you respond to that? Like, you can respond to that in different ways. You can keep going. You can go back. You can stay there until you die.
Yeah, I was going to say, I never thought about staying there and dying side by side. I should have tried that.
Yeah, I did that, and that made me cry. It was just very beautiful and tragic at the same time. And I don't know. Because there's a part of me that wants to say, and I'm sure that there are other people out there who would say, that Passage is not a game. I think it is a game, but I can see why maybe some people would say it's not. And I think that there's a lot of stuff in Passage that kind of lays the groundwork for walking simulators as a... It's almost like maybe a proof of concept for walking simulators.
Sure.
I
was going to say, it's as much of a game as Everybody's Gone to the Rapture or Gone Home. Like, there's these basic rules, and you can follow them. You don't have to, I guess. But like, there's basic rules that you follow to play through the game, and they're just incredibly basic in this game. And there's points of interest along the way, and it's the same thing. So yeah, totally. I understand what you're saying, and I agree. I think, it qualifies as a game in the current definition of what video games are. It qualifies. So it doesn't matter. It's still an interactive experience that you participate in that tells you a story, or at least tells you a point of view, that being the point of view of its author, and just gives you an experience and lets you interpret what that might be. So whatever. Like, I don't know if that makes any sense, but I don't think that it really necessarily matters whether it's a game or not. I agree with you that it kind of is a piece of art. Even though I didn't love it and didn't necessarily get what's great about it, I do understand the people that say that this game is art. Mm-hmm. So that's all.
Well, I think, there's not really, I don't think there can be a debate whether or not it is art, because one of the important things that Passage did as a thing is it brought the idea of, I remember when it came out, there were a lot of articles online going, can a video game make you cry? And that was kind of the big question back in 2007, because in 2007, the landscape of emotional games was non-existent. Like, think back to 2007. What was the most emotional game out there at the moment? Maybe
Uncharted 1?
Tetris?
Maybe.
You mean
I guess
to date or that year? I thought you meant that year.
To date.
Okay, sorry.
At that point, I think the only other time I had seen people talk about video games making them cry was at that big at the E3 that The Legend of Zelda was revealed, announced, and people were crying about it.
I would say Final Fantasy VII.
Final Fantasy VII is another one.
Yeah.
9 also. I would add.
Yep.
Metal Gear Solid. We could go on, Jack.
Battletoads. I hear that game's really hard and made people cry.
Well, I'm not arguing that it was the first game to make people cry, but I think it is the first game that reached the mainstream and told people, influential art people in the art community outside of video games, that games can be a medium for emotional things, like can tackle what art tackles in general.
Well,
like,
sure.
Back in 2007, the big debate was whether or not games were art.
Yeah.
Hasn't
that debate been settled finally, honestly? Is that even a debate anymore?
I don't think it's a real debate anymore. I think maybe the debate now is which games qualify as art.
I suppose.
Can something like Uncharted be art, but does that mean Madden's not art? And it's all just semantics. Any argument about what is and isn't art eventually comes down to just a semantic question, because it's a subjective qualification based on whatever society you're in.
Well, I will say New York's Museum of Modern Art considers Passage definitely art.
Well, right. Like, it was selected as one of their first games in permanent storage or display.
It says collection. I think.
Okay.
They sometimes things are on display and sometimes things aren't, but
it's in the museum.
Yeah. And when the video game art collection is on display, then it's on display. It's just not always on display. I think they can't display everything at once, or they don't have that big of a building.
Right. Well, and not only that, but Jason Rohrer is one of the only game designers who's had a dedicated collection. Like I think he had a collection of 14 games displayed at a circuit of museums around the country.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. And no other game designer has had that. He's designed a lot of interesting games. I think people might have heard of the Castle Doctrine, which was kind of this online multiplayer game about defending your house against intruders. And you could invade other people's houses and try and steal their money and then get it back to your house and then defend it.
Giant Bomb talked a lot about that game.
Yeah, it's I haven't played that one, but I've heard it. People talked about that game all the time for years. It's. I think. I don't know. I think Passage inspires a lot of strong reactions from people, and whether that's your reaction, Daniel, which was kind of a shrug, a very strong shrug.
Well, that was honestly my initial reaction too, but I thought about it and played it more, and it's kind of grown on me a little bit. I mean, it's not like I didn't understand what it was about the first time I played it.
Right.
I don't know. I guess I didn't.
I mean, listen, if you go and you look at what's Picasso's painting called there, what's that one?
All of them?
I was going to say, that could be any.
I mean, if you go, the famous one, the most famous
the famous one of Picasso?
Come on, you know which one I'm talking about. If you go into that and just look at it, and then
which one are you talking
away.
I don't know which one. That's what I'm like.
Come on, the one about the...
I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I genuinely don't know.
The one with the bull and the clocks.
Guernica?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
The one that's huge.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I mean...
Understand that my confusion comes literally right behind my computer screen is a blown up version of his Man of La Mancha doodle.
No.
So...
No.
Okay.
If you go and look at that, Guernica?
Guernica, yeah.
Guernica. If you go and look at that for 2 minutes in a museum, and then you walk away, the chances are you might not get much out of it at all. But when the longer you think about it, and if you research what all of it means,
it's one of the most heartbreaking paintings.
Yeah, it's incredible. But just looking at it briefly without really taking the time to uncover everything that it holds, you're not going to get much out of it. And I can see this game being the same kind of thing. So the more you guys talk about it and hearing more about like what you got out of it, like I respect it for that, definitely, even if I didn't get it in my 5 minutes with it. So that's awesome that a game exists that can do that. I think other games exist that can do that too, and I'd love to talk about them. But the fact that this is one of the first ones to really do that is really impressive.
Yeah, and I think it even holds up to modern day standards, because I think, like you mentioned, Journey and To the Moon, but I feel like those games are going for different things entirely. Like Journey is very much it's about the journey, is kind of cyclical, and
I think this game's very cyclical.
I don't think it is though. I think it is a passage, whereas Journey purposely makes the connections. If things are all cyclical in nature,
sure.
I think Passage is much more locked into how our lives work in time. Like it's not so much a cycle as it is going from point A to point B, and then you're done.
Journey is the same way, but then you start up again, and you can start this game up again too.
Right, but I think Journey makes a lot more overt connections to like reincarnation and
Yeah.
Like
this game keeps all that more abstract.
Right.
Yes.
This game, that aspect of it is outside of the game itself.
Right. That's all in your interpretation of it.
Right. And To the Moon is much more heavily narrative based around a specific individual's life.
Yeah.
Which could be extrapolated to be more abstract. But I think Passage is the kind of game that a lot of people can play and see maybe themselves or people they know in it, Mm-hmm. This is one of those times where I kind of wish we had maybe a female voice on the show, because I wonder if women are able to connect with Passage the same way, because the main character is a man, and I wonder if that different gender dynamic affects Passage and what they get out of it.
Well, definitely, since, the main character is a man, and then he meets a woman, and the woman's the first to die, and then he dies, and he's supposed to be, you as the player, as him, are supposed to be affected by her death. I could certainly see some people not appreciating that, but, when you look at it as this is just the authored experience that he created.
Right, because the character in Passage is supposed to be Jason Rohrer, or at least is based off of him.
Right.
Like, he made it to look like himself.
Right.
So, I don't know. I feel like it's an interesting overlap.
Yeah.
But I guess I was kind of thinking that we'd probably talk more about, what, because I know in the past we've had a lot of conversations about what makes a game, and we were talking about this. You mentioned this is more of an experience than a game. I don't know, how arty can a game be and still be a game, I guess. Like, is this right on the edge, or can we get like even more artier with like maybe visual novels or something?
Those types of discussions are always tough for me, because I think if somebody wants to call their whatever they do art, they should be able to call it art. If they want to make something and call it a game, they should be able to call it a game if they want. It's up to us as the consumers to, decide if we want to acknowledge that by downloading it or buying it or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a game can be too arty to never be, or I don't think it can get so arty that it couldn't be a game at all.
Right.
And I don't think that a game could be so tasteless or have no art in it that it could not be considered a game still anyway, like, say, Duke Nukem. It's just, it's all subjective.
Yeah. I mean, maybe this is just kind of a moot issue now that people have kind of become more accustomed to the walking simulator style of game.
I think there are plenty of holdouts on that.
Oh, sure.
Genre, for sure.
Right, but I guess why is that? Like, is it because the gameplay is slower paced? Is it because it's more of a slog than it is to, say, play something like the new Doom?
I think it's because there's a limited amount of interactivity. Because when you said what qualifies a game as a game, like, what comes into my mind is that, like, can you interact with it? Even if it's just a linear story that it wants to tell you, do you have control over how that story plays out? Whether that control is extensive in that there's branching paths and all this other stuff, or is that control incredibly simplistic and you just control the pace? To me, that's all it needs. But then I think about that, and I think that the reason people have issues with walking simulators is because that degree of control is so small that I think some people expect more control over the experience, more interactivity, more more agency for the player. And I can understand that. I think I don't personally think that it's a sliding scale, though.
Okay.
So, and I think some people think that it's a sliding scale, and there's a point at which you don't cross, or it's basically not a game anymore. I've even heard some reviews of Uncharted. Like, I watched one on YouTube the other day that was basically like, is Uncharted 4 still a game? And it's, I explained how a lot of it is very much like a walking simulator, but it's all very linear, but it's still a game. You're still interacting with it. And that's all I think that it really requires.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
It is one of those semantic arguments, like our game is art. Like, is it a game? Like you said, interaction is required. I don't think you can have a game without some form of interaction. And I think that the kind of interaction that we're getting with a lot of more modern games is not the kind of interaction that people are used to, and that change is kind of, I think it throws off a lot of people and meets a lot of pushback, especially when oftentimes kind of what is on the forefront of changing that perception for general gamers are these arty games, these weird experimental small games. And I think that can sometimes lead to a lot of derision, because the name walking simulator itself was originally meant to be kind of derogatory.
Right.
And now it's just kind of, I mean, at least it seems to me like it's just kind of become more of a commonplace descriptor.
Yeah. It's like Obamacare.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like, as long as there's that interaction and the developer, the person who makes it, the people who make it want to call it a game, then it's a game. Like, we don't have that's part of the problem with the term, is we don't have a better umbrella term for what these things are. Like, we are still using the same term we used in the 80s for Atari games.
Yeah.
And obviously we are far beyond what those games could even dream of back then. Mm-hmm. And so, I actually, while I was kind of researching for this, about 2 years ago, we had a big kerfuffle on our old podcast, and it was talking about games and what we should call games if they're not games anymore. Mm-hmm. And one of the ideas floated out there on the podcast was, well, we call them experiences. And we kind of figured at the time that maybe that was too silly. But I read an article the other day that was like, well, maybe the term game is outdated, so we should call them experiences. And I was like, oh, we were a little bit ahead of the curve on that one, guys.
Who was it that floated that experiences name?
It might have been you.
I think it was me.
I'm pretty sure it was me. Pretty sure. Yeah.
Might have been Jeremy, though.
I don't know. I don't remember who it was.
We could go back and listen.
I don't really remember, but I do remember. Weren't we talking about Gone Home, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah,
we were talking about
and Jack,
Gone Home.
weren't you the one that didn't want to call it a game at that time?
I was the one who was suggesting maybe we don't call it a game.
Yeah.
We call it, because game is an archaic term, and maybe we need a new term for games in general.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember.
Interesting how opinions can change.
Digital experiences.
Yeah. It's so. I don't know if I have the same opinion now as I did back then, but my opinion now is that if people, you can't stop somebody from calling something a game, so there's no sense in getting upset about it or trying to make developers classify or have all these variables in it to make sure they can sell it as a game or give it away for free as a game. And it's up to the individual to decide whether or not they think it's an experience they want to deem a game or not. And at that point, it really doesn't matter. That's individual taste. Like, a novel's supposed to have a certain, approach to the way it's supposed to be written, like by textbook. But if something's not written in, with that same sequence of events, or if it's a little bit out of place, it's not a novel because of that. Or if a movie really sucks, it's still a movie. Or is it a film?
Well, I mean, there are plenty of art house movies that are, use weird structures or have very little going on. But I mean, they are still movies.
Yeah, so it doesn't just because something's a game doesn't define it as something everybody's going to enjoy or love or even appreciate. It just
go watch Tree of Life.
It's just a basic word used to describe something, kind of like gamer. It's similar to that. I mean.
Well, I do think it is interesting that we never, instead of going the route of calling them something else, the term game just got bigger.
Yeah.
To mean more things, and then
more encompassing.
And then we came up with a genre to classify these games that, granted, was originally meant to be, a slam on what those kinds of games were, but is now just kind of a thing you call them.
Yeah.
So.
Do you? So here's the thing. I think we need to change the name of the podcast.
Oh, the best experiences period?
Best experiences period.
That's not going to happen. I'd have to make a new logo, and I don't want to do that.
That doesn't really roll off the tongue either.
Not quite the same, no.
We could call it the best XP period.
There you
go. Ooh, hey.
I think we're...
BXPP.
Yes.
Let's just stick with games.
No. So, I guess, do we think this is one of the best games, period?
I think it's a game you should play because it's free and easy, and why not? I don't think it's a game you absolutely have to play now.
I would say no as well, with the caveat that I could certainly see the impact of this game and its place in the pantheon of gaming growing out in circles. So I might, eat crow at some point, but I'd say no.
Well, I'd say yes, and I'm not. I know it's a losing battle against you two, but
it's not losing.
I think the way that this game brought art games to kind of the masses and people outside the game industry for the first time in a substantial way, and I mean you can see that in the fact that it's part of the New York Museum, like it's part of their collection, and there are only 14 games in that collection.
See, I guess I'm curious as to how many people that play games regularly knew about this game, because neither Daniel or I knew about it. And I'm not suggesting we're, the only, like whatever we know about is the only thing that ever happens. But I'm curious, if, a lot of our listeners had heard of this before now, or had not. And if not, I guess I have to wonder how much of an impact it really had on the mainstream. I can see it impacted the people that were already in that sort of mindset, and probably people in Canada. That wasn't a joke. I mean, isn't that where?
No. I guess I would say it reached out beyond the gaming community, and I say that because it was written up about in the Wall Street Journal and all these other different things, and a lot of the writers were expressing surprise at the fact that a game made them feel something.
No, and that's cool.
And I think that's really neat, and it's important. I would argue that the artistic merit of the game itself is more important. I just think it is a pure. It's a pure experience. Those 5 minutes are meaningful, I think. And whether you interpret that as a slog or not, that's the point. Life is what we make of it, and passage is what we make of it. So, I mean, like you said, it's free, and it's available online. You can download it. It will play on pretty much anything.
I will say, warning, it won't play on my phone, so doesn't mean it won't play on anybody else's, but it won't play on mine. From the App Store, iOS.
Right.
Full disclosure.
I find it interesting because I'm sure there are some people out there who would listen to this and hear our opinion on this game and hear us say, no, it's not a best game period, and then yell at their phones or whatever because we've named some other games best games period that I'm sure many people would disagree with.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, though. That's the thing about being human.
One of our, yeah, exactly. But that's why this show is very subjective. So that's the way it is. And over time, after maybe I revisit this game, maybe my opinion will change on it, but probably not.
I mean, I really just wanted to bring it up because I'm pretty sure a lot of people haven't heard of it, and it was. I think it's something that everyone should play if they want to see something they might not have seen before, because it's a very unique game.
Yeah, and it's not. There's no investment for it, so there's no reason not to try it out. I mean,
we're an educational podcast, so
it doesn't cost you anything.
I mean, like that's kind of it. Like we've done a lot of episodes on stuff like Tetris, Uncharted. People have heard of those games before, and figured, hey, let's do something that no one's heard of.
Yeah, I think we should do more episodes like this from time to time.
I agree that people should definitely play it and determine for themselves if they think it's the best game, period.
Let us know if you agree or disagree. Please yell at Daniel Jones at IndyJones84 on Twitter.
Or Jack Gardner at Riverboat Jack. Or Jeremy Brown.
Holla at your boy.
At Mojo Monkey 12. He might not be labeled as Jeremy Brown right now on Twitter. He's something weird.
I'm Jeremy.
You'll find him.
I'm just Jeremy. Also, it's Mojo Monkey _12, by the way.
_12, I'm sorry. My bad. Tell us all about Extra Life, Jack.
Hey, do you like playing games? Do you like helping kids? Well, then you should sign up for Extra Life, because Extra Life is a 24-hour video game marathon. It happens every year. Basically, you raise money, and you get to pick a local Children's Miracle Network hospital. 100% of everything you raise goes directly to that hospital to pay for the treatment for sick kids and injured kids whose families can't pay for treatment themselves. So it's a really great cause. Get a bunch of friends together, play some games, and, help sick kids while having fun at the same time. It's really great.
100%. Jack Gardner.
Daniel Jones.
Jeremy Brown.
Daniel Jones.
Thank you both for joining me tonight to talk about this passage that we've been on. And thank you, good listeners, for joining us for episode 26 of the Best Games Period. If you like the show, let us know and share with your friends so they know how awesome we are. You can follow us on Twitter at Best Games Period. And you can find the show on SoundCloud, Libsyn, iTunes, Game Informer, and Extra Life, as Jack said. You can also watch video versions of the episodes as they go up on YouTube. They're not completely up to date right now because we've been busy. So get off our asses about it, alright? The two of you that actually watched. Anyway, come back next week for what should be a heated discussion on blank. Until next time, thanks for listening.